friends, hello, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Hello. So sorry for, well, I'm not even sorry, there's just kind of a change of scenery today because it's a long story, but I can't film at my house right now, so I am filming here. This is my parents' house. I'm on their porch. I'm hiding from all of the dogs that currently reside in the house, and I'm gonna film this video. So I've had this idea for a video for a while. Lately what I do is if I have a video idea, I like open a Google Doc, and then I don't have a candle of the day today. Ugh. My mom doesn't like candle. I know, it's weird. Normally what I do now is if I have an idea for a video, I open up like a Google Doc and I just put the title in, and then I come back to it when I'm ready to like form the thoughts. I've had this one on deck for a minute, and that is talking about why I think influencer culture is so toxic. And I just think this is a really interesting topic. I feel like there's a lot of directions you can go in. I tried to focus on like kind of my core, not so much argument, but I try to approach these videos like I'm writing a thesis or something, and I'm like trying to defend why I think what I think. But I'm sure there's things I miss. I really wanted this video to not only be like me giving my opinion, but also serve as kind of in the comment section, being able to just sound off about like what you think about this topic. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you have a differing opinion? Is there more to it? Please let me know down below. And yeah, without further ado, let's talk about why all these influencers go bad. Hi friends, Editing Me here, and today's video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. You guys know I've been working with ExpressVPN for the past few months, but I've actually been using the service long before that. Since being stuck at home due to COVID, ExpressVPN has been a lifesaver. Number one, it keeps my data private and safe, which I absolutely love. Not using ExpressVPN would basically be the equivalent of like texting your friend while in class and then the teacher takes your phone and reads it to everybody. So it helps keep everything private. However, the biggest reason I love ExpressVPN, and the thing I always tell you guys about because it's amazing, is that it really expands all of your entertainment options while you're stuck at home. Quick example that happened to me recently was my husband and I were watching Naruto. We've been on like a Naruto binge, and you can watch the dubbed version of Naruto for free through like Amazon, but only up to a certain season. So we got to like season 8 of Naruto, and all of a sudden it was gone, and you had to pay like $20 per season to be able to finish the show subbed. You had to start paying for it. So I whipped out my ExpressVPN. I set us to Canada. Canada's Netflix has significantly more seasons of Naruto that are subbed. So if you're an anime fan, it's very, very helpful. They have tons of anime options that you can unlock by putting yourself in a different country. If you're interested in finding out how you can get 3 months free of ExpressVPN, visit expressvpn.com/SmokeyGlow or click the link in my description box down below. Thank you so much to ExpressVPN for allowing me to watch Naruto and also protecting my data, and let's jump right into the video. So with this sort of rise of so many influencers being canceled, I don't know if I fully I have thoughts on cancel culture, but with so many influencers being so like canceled or so problematic, and there's all these dramas coming out, there's constantly controversy happening, I kind of have started to wonder, it's almost like a what came first, the chicken or the egg debate, right? Because is it that just horrible people happen to become famous? Or, and it's just like a few sort of bad apples of these influencers and they're just the ones that are starting to become famous? Or is there a culture being created on the internet right now that is almost breeding these people to go from everyday normal people into these sort of scandalous semi-celebrities? I also just want to say, I think the big thing I want to focus on in this video when I'm giving examples is not so much, I feel like there's a whole separate video that could be made about people who do sort of problematic things before they become famous, but I really want to focus on what happens after a person gains followers, right? Like I want to talk about how these people go from like teens filming on their phones in their bedrooms to these like clout monsters is the best way that I can put it. And I think I kind of want to start off by just saying I don't think that this sort of rise in problematic influencers is just due to bad people becoming famous. a lot of the time. I think that for a lot of people that's the case, but I also think there's a lot of people and a lot of influencers who maybe didn't start off being this way, who didn't start off really money hungry or like clout chasey or whatever, but have slowly evolved into that because of this culture that has been created. I can understand why people think that though. Like I can understand why people think, well, it's just a few people that were already bad and now they're just continuing to be bad as famous people, like now they're even worse. I can understand why people think that, especially in recent years. Like in the last 5 years, we've really seen this massive influx and this sort of boom in the influencer space where it feels like there's hundreds of thousands of people that have like over 1 million followers somewhere. The crazy thing about internet culture and influencers is that anybody can do it. You don't need a specific skill set necessarily. Like you don't really need anything other than a phone that records video, which most people have. And so we're seeing this massive influx. So I think you could make the argument that like, oh, it's just kind of a one-off. It's just people who are already bad. But I want to kind of explain in this video why I don't think that's what it is. I think number one, kind of the number one reason or thing that people almost point to when we're talking about, I'm using the word problematic a lot, but just because it's kind of the best umbrella term, but kind of what happens to influencers that causes them to sort of change from normal, everyday, relatable people to these mega influencers. And I think a massive part of that, like I don't think you can talk about influencer culture without talking about Los Angeles. It's kind of almost a meme at this point. Like it's like, oh, so-and-so moved to LA. Can't wait for them to change. Can't wait for them to buy a Tesla and a Prada bag and sell out. Like it's kind of this sort of meme almost that when you hear your favorite influencers moving to LA, there's sort of this collective groan from their fan base being like, I wish you would not do that, because it almost seems like the culture in LA really does change people. I kind of wondered like why that is, because a lot of people go to LA or New York City to sort of seek opportunity. That's like the big reason that is given. And that's honestly the reason I see most influencers give. Like they're like, oh, there's just more opportunities in Los Angeles, so that is why I'm gonna go there. I will say I think that that's a kind of true, but I also will say that I don't know how much I agree with the whole like LA brings opportunities thing. If you're like an actor or actress or a singer or somebody trying to start out in the entertainment industry, the whole moving to LA thing makes a lot more sense, because it's like, well, there's gonna be auditions there, there's gonna be more agents there, there's more kind of talent scouts over there. But when you're doing something like being an influencer, you can theoretically film from anywhere in the world. Like you can do your job anywhere. And like, yeah, maybe you'll miss out on some parties and some sort of networking, but I think the bigger reason that influencers say that LA is sort of the land of opportunity for them is because that's simply where all the other influencers went. It almost feels like when Vine sort of fell off and all those Viners became influencers, they all moved to LA. So now that's just kind of the standard classic thing that every influencer does. Like it's kind of like the first few generations of influencers did it, so that's what everyone else is now gonna do. And this is where I get a little sort of like, because I don't want to just like say it's LA. It's the problem of LA. It's the culture of LA. Because while I'm sure there is sort of a culture in LA that can contribute to this, I also know a lot of people just like personally who are like singers or aspiring actors or actresses or are, you know, trying to make it in the movie business in one way or another. I know a ton of people who have moved to LA for that reason, like to kind of find success and have opportunities. And you don't see this sort of drastic change in behavior that you tend to see with influencers. So I kind of think there's something to not only influencers living in LA, but I also think there's something to large quantities of influencers living in LA. Like it's almost like its own population of Los Angeles is LA influencers, not just people who live in LA, but also the influencers that live there. And like I said, I know a ton of people who have gone there, and you see people all the time who like go to LA, chase their dreams, and have this success story. But you don't see as noticeable of a change as you do with these influencers. So like, why is that? I have a couple of theories. Number one, flex culture. I think flex culture plays a massive role in why a lot of influencers change when they go to LA. It's not a secret that there's definitely this culture amongst LA influencers of flexing wealth, having nice cars, living in these absurdly large mansions that like they don't pay for, owning all the new designer bags, wearing designer items, being paparazzi, flexing about how much money you make per month. Like there's all of this sort of flexing that happens in that particular genre of like LA influencers, and I think that's why we see it so much. I've made multiple videos about flex culture, and I have a lot of issues with flex culture. I think that there's kind of this weird sort of pressure that people feel to have all the new designer items, to constantly show that they have money. It's almost like with these influencers, it's not enough to like have the money. You have to be able to show everybody else that you have this money. And the main reason people like these YouTubers and Instagram models and everybody initially is because they're relatable. So when they move to LA and they're living in gigantic mansions and they are starting to carry Prada bags and every post on Instagram is about a designer item that they got, they start to lose that relatability. And also I think there's something to be said about your entire personality and persona being about your wealth and your money. While I have like a love for fashion and things like that, and I love endlessly scrolling through like high-end purse TikTok because I think it's fascinating. I'm like, I get it. Like I get the love for those things. When you almost make it a core part of your personality, it can definitely be very off-putting and very sort of vapid to a lot of people, especially given the COVID-19 pandemic. Like I think that sort of blew up the game for everybody because honestly, nobody really wants to see influencers flexing their like $20,000 shopping sprees anymore. Like most people don't want to see that right now because for most people, the pandemic has had a massive and detrimental impact on their financial situation. But for these influencers, they haven't been affected. Like it's almost like nothing has happened to them. And so their wealth and their flexing has not stopped because in their sort of culture that they've created out there, that's sort of a core way to exist. And it almost feels like in order to live in LA and hang out with that certain crowd, it almost feels like peer pressure, kind of, almost like high school. Like I remember in high school, I might be showing that I'm older here, but everybody's in my high school, the thing was Ugg boots. Like when I was in middle school, everybody had to have Ugg boots. And if you didn't have the real ones, they would call them thugs. If you didn't have the real ones, people would literally pick on you and like make fun of you for having fake Uggs versus the real ones. Because the fake ones were like $20 and the real ones were like $150. So people would make fun of people for having fake ones. I got made fun of until I got the real ones. And it was like this sort of peer pressure to have the real thing, to have the authentic sort of showcasing of money. It's almost the same way in LA. It's like a lot of these people never really got out of that sort of high school, middle school type of mindset. And I think that kind of leads me into my point too, which is that a lot of these people are very young people, and a lot of them got famous at a very young age. So a lot of them never really had to like work traditional jobs. A lot of them never really had to go to school in a collegiate setting. A lot of them don't have a ton of friends outside of maybe the friends they made in high school or all of these influencers. A lot of people who move to LA to sort of chase their dream are sometimes younger people, but for the most part, it's people who haven't yet made it. Like it's people who need to work in restaurants in order to pay their rent while they're going on auditions. It's people who are working and sort of hustling to make it, whereas influencers who make that move to LA, typically it's because they've already made it. They've already made their money. They've already kind of had their hustle happen earlier on. So once they get there, they're kind of like stepping on the gas in order to achieve this sort of high-end lifestyle. And because a lot of them are still young and don't have a lot of real-world experience, it really heavily contributes to this sort of flex culture. And I think that also kind of leads me into my third point. I think point 2 and 3 are very similar, and they all kind of compound together because you have these young people who are in this place that is very obsessed with appearances and money and flexing and wealth. You have all of that. And then you have these young people who, for the most part, haven't had a lot of real world experience. And then you compound that again into that they are all surrounded by each other and they are all affirming each other's takes on things. And I'm gonna be completely honest here, and obviously I'm not at the level of a lot of these people. Like I don't have millions of people following me, so I don't know what that's like. But just speaking from like personal experience at my level, social media can be a very like isolating thing, and it can be very easy to start to believe that like you have the hardest job in the world, or that you like deserve all of these things. It doesn't come to like, oh, you work for this money anymore. It's you deserve this level of money. You deserve this level of fame. You deserve this level of attention, because they're all surrounded by each other and affirming to each other like, yes, we deserve this. There becomes this sort of entitlement culture that starts happening around all of them, where they all just feel so entitled to what they have. Honestly, almost think that's like low-key. It's obviously not relatable, but I think it like makes sense when you think about it. Because if I was 18, and I can't even imagine 18-year-old me being in the position a lot of these influencers are in. Like if I was 18 and I had 3 million people constantly commenting on every picture I post, every video I post, being like, you're the best thing in the world, you're amazing, you're phenomenal, you're awesome. And then I also had to deal with like a little bit of hate, but I was also making millions of dollars. And I was surrounded by people, not only my friends, but like a team of people who were telling me that I was the best thing in the world and I was like the next big thing. I would also get a massive head. Like my ego would be the size of the Empire State Building. It's not that it's weird that it's happening. It's just that it becomes this bigger issue when you have, I don't know, 500 to 1,000 kids running around LA with egos the size of the Empire State Building. There's bound to be some problems there. And not only are those kids like running around LA with these massive egos, on top of that, they are now influencing the next generation of kids to act and behave in the way that they behave. And I think that leads me to my final point just about the LA influencer scene, which is that I think the reason it becomes almost like this, there's kind of this weird like animosity, I think, that a lot of these people have towards their fans. Because a lot of times their fans will call out this egocentric behavior, or they'll call out obsessive flexing, or they'll call out all of these problems, right? They'll call out that these influencers might seem out of touch or whatever. But because these influencers already have this sort of massive ego, they don't listen and they don't take that well. And I think a large reason that fan bases feel that way is because being an influencer is such a specific job, because it's literally you. Like it's you. You are your brand. That's not a job that's been like a thing in the past. This is a fairly new trend we're seeing with reality TV shows and now kind of turning into YouTubers and TikTokers and whatever, where you as a person are your brand. So when you are your brand, but you have this massive life-changing thing happen, which is gaining millions of followers and making a ton of money, you are obviously going to change, and your fan base might not respond well to that. And I think that leads to what happens to a lot of influencers, where they have these really big careers for a couple of years and then they let it sort of get to their head and they let it impact them, and then they sort of lose touch. They fall off because their fan base is just sick of watching somebody that they used to love change. I think there's also something to be said about, if I think about personally, and I am positive that I am not the only one that had this happen, if I think about who I was as an 18-year-old and then think about who I was as like a 22-year-old, they were very drastically different people. Those years are such formative years to begin with, without throwing in the public opinion of millions of people, the issues that come along with making millions of dollars. And I think that because this personality shift often happens, whether it be because they move to LA or what, I think because this happens and their fans call it out, I think that a lot of times influencers don't necessarily see this as valid criticism. And I think you could make, honestly, an entire video about if critiquing somebody's personality change, if it's not like directly hurting somebody, is something worthy of critiquing. But I think a lot of influencers don't see that as valid. And then when they get called out for stuff, they have this sort of defense up. They have this wall up because they're like, well, you're just criticizing me for existing, so fuck off. Like, that's kind of the mindset they have. And then to make it even worse, they're surrounded by 25 other, 18 to 22-year-olds that have the same exact mindset as them, that are affirming this to them, that are saying anybody who criticizes you, they're just haters. Don't pay attention to them. Don't pay attention to the haters. Only focus on your fans. And it again creates this very toxic mindset where you're not listening to any criticism because you deem all criticism criticism as invalid or just hate. So that's kind of my take on the LA influencer scene. But also I think there's this whole nother genre and like level of influencer who doesn't move to LA. And you kind of have to wonder like, okay, so what about them? Because we see it's not just LA influencers who sort of can become these very toxic people. So what about influencers who don't live in LA? Well, in my opinion, I think because social media exists, you don't even necessarily have to live in LA anymore to want to aspire to be like LA influencers, to fall victim to that culture. And I think a perfect example of that is somebody like Haley Pham, who I did a whole video, I did like an evolution of her career. And I found in that video, just through watching her from like start to where she is now, that it seems like even though she lives in Texas and she seemingly has some influencer friends, but she's not like surrounded by influencer friends, even still, she got sucked into that sort of flex-like culture of influencer culture because she's constantly on Instagram and she's constantly seeing all of these Instagram LA models flexing with Gucci and other designer items. So she felt like she had to almost fall into that and do that as well. It's the same way with the hate. When a lot of these influencers talk online about hate and about how everybody's just a hater to them and all of those things, if you see people that you look up to saying that, even if you yourself are somewhat of an influencer, you're gonna agree with that. You're gonna be like, yeah, they're almost affirming these like negative biases about themselves through the internet, which I think is so fascinating that LA culture, it has almost superseded Los Angeles at this point. Like a lot of influencers that are in that sort of genre of YouTube, this like lifestyle vlogger genre, they are impacted by those core group of people that are already in LA. And honestly, it kind of, again, I don't mean this to be like defending any of these people, because obviously I disagree with a lot of the things that a lot of these sort of YouTubers and Instagrammers have done. But at the same time, I almost get why this happens so much. Especially for people who don't even live in LA. So it's like, well, what's their excuse? Like, they're still living the quote unquote normal life. I almost get why this happens, because for people who don't live in Los Angeles, because being an influencer and being a YouTuber or an Instagrammer or whatever, it can be a very sort of isolating thing, especially if you find a large amount of success. If you think about it, your job is to, if you're a YouTuber, for example, your job is to sit in a room by yourself and literally talk to yourself. Like, nobody's here right now listening to me. I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to a camera that will in turn be eventually heard by all of you, but like, I'm speaking to myself. This job doesn't have coworkers. You're alone most of the time. And it's also a very sort of weird thing. Like, it's a weird job. It's weird to explain it to people. It's weird to explain the amount of money you're making. It's almost embarrassing to explain the amount of money you're making. It's weird to your friends who don't do it because they're like, literally, what are you doing? You sit alone and talk to a camera. And not only do you sit alone and like talk to a camera, then you sit alone in a dark room with a computer and you edit your videos. I think a lot of people have this sort of mindset that being a YouTuber is a very like glamorous job. And maybe for some people it is. Like, maybe when you get to a certain level and you can like hire editors and you can do a lot less. For the most part, most YouTubers who are doing the work themselves and they're like kind of one-man shows, it's a very isolating job. It's a very like not so glamorous, more just like you hear yourself talking a lot type of job. And I think that it's hard to almost relate to other people that aren't influencers, especially when you're a young person and you're still trying to find yourself. So it kind of makes sense that because you have this very isolating job that can isolate you from other people around you, that you would fall victim to wanting to find friendship and understanding in people that you see on social media. I low-key feel like I just described why social media exists in the first place, because the main reason influencers get popular, the main reason these influencers even have what they have, is because they have a young audience of people who feel alone and feel maybe misunderstood and feel isolated, and they find friendship and solace in their favorite creators. It's what parasocial relationships are. It's the same way for influencers, just on a larger scale. Which leads me, I'm doing such good segues for this video, oh my god. Which leads me to my next point, which is that most of these influencers and people have young child fans. They have fans that are younger than them. That's not to say the only people who watch YouTube and TikTok are young people. I am 26 and all I do is watch YouTube. And I know that most of my demographic based on my analytics, is people who are over the age of 18. So I know that there are people who like watch my content, my friends' content, other people's content who are older. However, for a lot of these younger influencers, the people who are watching them are either people who are their age or are much younger than them. It's pretty much known that the best way to make like a ton of money on YouTube and on the internet and everything is simply by having a child fan base, because they're going to buy everything you put out. And not only that, they are not going to see the sort of large scale macro problems with your behavior that adults might pick up on. So while adults on the internet space can be calling out somebody like James Charles or Shane Dawson or Jeffree Star, like while we can be calling them out, their young fan base likely doesn't understand the implications of what that person has done. Doesn't understand the problems with their behavior. So they have all of these young fans that are not only quite literally financially like bankrolling them, like allowing them to buy these mansions, all of these young fans are also telling them, no, you're amazing. You're perfect. You didn't make a mistake. There's no reason for you to be apologizing. Why are you even apologizing in the first place? You're phenomenal. You're fantastic. You're my favorite person in the world. So they get this sort of affirmation from both ends, because they're not only getting it from the teams that they surround themselves with and the influencers that they become friends with, but they are also getting it from the young kid fan base that they have built. They're supporting them through everything. They're diehard for their faith. That's why I think when we talk about cancel culture, I don't think it's, and people are like, oh, it doesn't work. I don't think it's talked about enough how, and honestly, this is something I often miss too, is like, it's kids. You can't explain that to them. They don't get that. All they care about is watching, James Charles blend his foundation. You also get to a certain point when you have enough child fans, and also when you've sort of almost been in enough scandals that your reputation is already poor, that you can have the option to just simply not respond to something. Like you could just literally ignore it, and eventually it will likely go away. For example, Tana Mongeau a few months ago, for I think it was Valentine's Day, launched these lingerie sets as part of a promotion with her OnlyFans. And the lingerie sets were, I think, like $30 or something. And they got there, and number one, people found them on AliExpress for like $2. So they were private labeled, which is not the biggest deal in the world. Like a lot of people private label, especially clothing and stuff like that. But it was just annoying because she portrayed it as like, oh, I made these. Like I think that was more of the problem, was the lack of transparency. But on top of that, all of the underwear that was getting sent to people was supposed to have these like little heart cutouts, and they were literally just gigantic holes. On top of that, people weren't getting their orders. People were not getting refunds. There was no back and forth between customer service happening. And Tana Mongeau has just literally never addressed this. And she likely never will. And it will likely never impact anything about her career that she never addressed this, and that she sold this sort of very faulty, poor quality product, or a product that didn't even show up. It's likely she won't even get called out for that, because if she doesn't address it and she doesn't make a big deal about it, it's probably going to get swept under the rug, which is what I think a lot of these influencers sort of bank on now. Is if they make these big mistakes like that, they just sort of bank on the fact that it's almost like a news cycle. It has an end time, and if you don't feed into it and you don't address it, a lot of times it can be swept under the rug. So I think you have these massive influencers almost ignoring scandals. Then I think you have this weird level of like mid-tier influencers. You have these sort of TikTok teens where they almost are trying to like mimic Tana Mongeau or James Charles or other influencers that have grown these massive platforms based on controversy. And you have these TikTok teens who are trying to sort of stir up controversy and stir up scandal on purpose in order to make money and views and get clout. Like we now have this whole new genre of younger influencers who are simply trying to cause controversy for clout. That is the main reason why I think that when COVID was at its peak last year, so many of those kids were going to parties and filming it and posting it on their stories, because they knew that they were going to get backlash. They knew that people were going to be mad at them. They knew that it was not the right thing to be doing. They knew the public outcry was going to be intense, but they did it anyway. And the only reason I can think that they would do that is because they know that controversy equals money, which equals clout. And that's what they want at the end of the day. They want what the Tana Mongeaus of the internet have. They want these massive $1 million multi-million-dollar businesses that they've created. And if that means getting in a scandal or two to get there so you can get your name out there, I don't think a lot of them have a problem with that. And I almost think the internet culture and influencer culture that has been created encourages that type of behavior. I think because influencer culture has sort of shown that negativity is good, it sort of breeds this problem even further. And the problem is here, just to like summarize everything, I could go on. There's so many, the problem with this is like, with this topic, you can just continually be like, but wait, there's more, because there's always more problem happening. But I think to kind of summarize everything, the biggest problem at hand is not even all of the things I've talked about, but the biggest problem is I don't know what the solution is. Like, I don't know how you sort of stop this cycle of influencer culture and how you sort of put an end to this weird cycle that we've put ourselves in on the internet. And I think what it comes down to, and like likely the biggest issue, is that they are influencers. So their job is to influence other people. And as we talked about, most of those other people are young people, are kids. They're being influenced by this large group of people who seemingly don't have sort of societally normal set of morals, and that is concerning. I think the only thing you can really do is like put out words of warning to a lot of these people and just be like, yeah, maybe clout and controversy will get you this sort of, or like bad behaviors or acting entitled or whatever, will get you this sort of short-term success, right? But like there is a life after you turn 25. Like this is, you're at the beginning of your life and you're already throwing away your reputation and throwing all that away just for this sort of internet clout. Like what comes after this? That's what I want to ask people like Bryce Hall or the kids who are like punching people just because they made them mad or peeing on their fans, like being so entitled. I want to ask, like, what is your plan for the future, I guess? Like, where do you see your life trajectory going? Because being problematic on the internet will really only get you so far. I don't know what these young people are planning to do once they turn like 30. Like, what is the plan? I don't know. And I also think it's important to, even though it's a kind of a double-edged sword, because it's like, well, they do these things for attention and they get attention from controversy. I still think it's important for people, even if it's not like drama or commentary channels, just like everyday people, to be calling out that behavior, just to show the younger generation that is being influenced, like, hey, the culture that these people are living in is not like normal. Like this is not normal life. It's not even real life. It's like glorified high school. Like nothing about that is real life and substantial. So it's super important to teach the younger generation that's being influenced by a lot of these people, like, hey, these really dangerous like moral boundaries that are being set probably shouldn't be your guiding force going forward. I think it's so much more than just shitty people becoming famous. I think the way that the internet influencer has sort of risen in the past few years and the way they are becoming these low-key like semi-celebrities and the way that this culture is cycling is so interesting, and also I think has a massive impact on the way that we see people acting and presenting themselves today. So anyway, I don't know. I really am excited to hear what you guys have to say about this. Let me know what your thoughts down below. Obviously, I am convinced that my children are going to be studying influencer culture in like anthropology classes because it's all just so bananas to me. So yeah, let me know what you think down below. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching this video. If I have less videos this month, I do apologize. I'm having a lot going on, but I'm here and I'm still gonna be posting as much as I can. So yeah. I love you guys so much. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, or just subscribe, or do neither. Honestly, just so happy you're watching me. Thank you for being here. My merch, my social media, my vlog channel, and my podcast channel, and everything I'm wearing on my face will be linked down below, along with my social justice spotlight. So you can go check that out, stay informed, and stay involved. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! What?